Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm excited to share with you the books that I have been reading and some books that I am beginning to read that I'll be reading in the upcoming month of March. I have actually been doing really good with my reading, and what I did this month was I finished up a lot of books from 2019, which was great, and I was happy to kind of complete them because I hate it when I leave a book unfinished. Unless I really am not enjoying it, I like to follow through, and there were so many books that I recently just dropped the ball on, and what I noticed for the first time is that sometimes you start to read a book and you're just not interested and it's just not grabbing you, and if you revisit it at another time, it could be very captivating. So it really depends kind of on your own mood, which I just figured if I didn't like it, I was never gonna like it. And I experienced that with one of the books that I'm going to be showing to you. And I'm glad that I realized if you're not feeling it with a particular book, to maybe put it away and try it again at another time, because it could just be the way that you're feeling, what's going on in your life at the time, and the book just was not connecting with you, and maybe another time it really will. So that being said, let me tell you about the books that I have finished reading and some of the books that I am working on for the month of March. So I did finish Little Women over the holidays. I finished part 1. And over the month of February, I finished part 2, and this book is just so endearing. I love the March family. I love Marmee, who is the mom. The 4 sisters are just so kind and loving and close. It's such a close-knit family, and you really feel from beginning to end of this book like you are part of the family. You feel like you are in the March house, that you know the sisters. It's a hard book to walk away from in the end. It's a hard book to disconnect with because the characters really become part of your life, and I think especially because I really took my time in reading this book and I read it over a few months and over the holiday season, the characters really became close to me, and it was really, some of the book was hard for me to get through. I felt really sad at times, I felt really happy at times, and I just absolutely love Little Women. Highly recommend it. Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And her home actually is in Massachusetts, which is not too far from me. I'd love to visit someday. Definitely on my list of places to see in the near future. I can't believe, I think I read somewhere, you guys know how I always like try to figure out more about the author if I really enjoy a book. I did that with the Brontes. I wanted to learn more about their family, and Charlotte especially, because I love Jane Eyre. And when I do that, I'm fascinated by some of the things that I find out. And Louisa May Alcott wrote this book, I want to say in like 10 days. I couldn't even read this book in 10 days. She wrote this book so quickly. She didn't even want to write it. She wasn't even interested in writing this book, but she ended up doing it. I think the publishing company told her if she would write a children's book, like kind of a young adult children's book, they would publish one of her father's books that he was working on, something like that. There's some story, but anyway, she did not want to write this book and really wasn't interested in doing so. But then I also came to find out that she also had 3 sisters. They were 4 sisters altogether, and I believe each sister was based on one of the characters in Little Women, which is interesting. So yeah, it was just a really interesting backstory, and I really love this book. And I'm going to read you a part of this because I do think that Jo, the character Jo, is based on herself, on Louisa May Alcott. So I was thinking when I was reading this one part that she was kind of talking about herself, and she never did get married, so I don't know why, but this, I think this is like coming directly from her. Gentlemen, which means boys, be courteous to the old maids, no matter how poor and plain and prim, for the only chivalry worth having is that which is readiest to pay difference to the old. Protect the feeble and serve womankind regardless of rank, age, or color. Just recollect the good aunts who have not only lectured and fussed, but nursed and petted too often without thanks, the scrapes that they helped you out of, the tips they had given you from their small store, the stitches the patient old fingers have set for you, the steps willing old feet have taken, and gratefully pay the dear old ladies the little attentions that women love to receive as long as they live. I felt like she was saying that directly. I don't know why, but I had to share that. Another book that I just finished is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. I love this story. You know, I'm so familiar with the Disney adaptation of it, but when I read this and I was just kind of taken by surprise. It's a little bit more violent than the Disney movie, and Tinkerbell is I know I said this on the last video, she's kind of vicious and mean. I shouldn't say kind of, she actually is. But the end of this book really made me sad because it just talks about how we grow up, right? And how things change, and when spoiler alert if you're not familiar with the story of Peter Pan, and this part wasn't in the Disney movie, I guess, which is why it really like kind of pulled at my heartstrings and made me sad. But when Peter comes years later to see Wendy's kind of mortified because she's old now, like she has a child of her own and she's much older, and she's kind of trying to hide herself from him and dimming the lights, and he's like, let me see you, let me see you. And it's like such a harsh reality when he sees that she's aged, and it made her realize how she has gotten so much older. And just the whole end scene of the book had me in tears. It really did. I don't know, but anyway, I really enjoyed reading this. I'm glad that I was able to finish it. I only had a little bit to go after our Disney trip, but I'm glad that I took the time to finish reading it. And then the other part of it is Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens. Why can't I say that? In Kensington Gardens, and I hope to read that at some point too. So this is the book that I was telling you guys that I never finished. Back when I did Victober in October, I was part of the way through this book, and then I got so caught up in Victorian reading, and that was kind of time consuming because I feel like it's just harder to read those types of books, and I never went back to this. And once I finished Little Women and Peter Pan, I was like, there's one book on my shelf that I haven't finished, and I kind of lost interest in it. But when I picked this book back up, this is Miss Buncle's book by D.E. Stevenson, I was so captivated by this book. It is just such a great story. Miss Buncle needed to make some quick money, and she decides to write a book, but basically what she does is all of the people that live in her town are characters, and she talks about them individually, so when the book comes out, they recognize that that it's them. Like, it's so obviously their town, and everybody knows who is who, so there's this big uproar, and everybody's freaking out, and they're trying to figure out who the author is, and they can't figure it out, and that's all I'm going to tell you. But it really was such a fun read, and you really get to know the characters. Some of them are very comical, and you really feel like you're in this close-knit town where everyone knows everyone else's business. It's just a really sweet and cozy read. I really recommend it. I enjoyed this so much, and I'm so happy that I went back to it and finished the story. And then there were a couple of like book club books. One was Jacqueline Woodson's Red at the Bone. This book, I'm not quite sure how I feel about this book. At first, I thought it was pretty good because it did bring up some emotions, and it did bring me kind of to tears a couple of times, and the writing is very well done. It was kind of hard to follow because when characters are talking to each other, she doesn't always identify who's saying what. You kind of have to figure it out for yourself. Also, it switches from character to character. It goes through 3 generations of women. You have the granddaughter, the grandmother, then you have like the mom, so you have like the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter, and they're all going through the time of their life where they were entering into womanhood. They were 16 years old and having a celebration of that, and different things that each of them went through at that age, which was all very different through the 3 of them, and it brings together these 3 generations of families and their relationships, kind of the mother-daughter relationships throughout the entire storyline. And it's a good quick read. It's not really that many pages. Let me just say, it's less than 200 pages, and it's very well written. I know a lot of people in the book club did not like this book at all. I didn't think it was horrible, but I also didn't think it was really the best book ever. So take what you will of that. The other book club read that I had was Daisy Jones and the Six, and this is by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book was entertaining. It was an interview of all of these members of a band, and they're each being interviewed and telling the story kind of from beginning to the end of their career through the early 70s. So there's a lot of drug use and substance abuse and partying and people trying to beat addiction. And then there is a love story and the challenges of all of the relationships because of the lifestyle, being in a band and traveling and things like that, and then also trying to have a family and children. At the end, there's kind of a surprise. I won't say what it is, but the interview goes on throughout the entire book, and then when you get to the end of the interview, you kind of start to question if people were really honestly answering everything that was asked. So I don't want to like spoil it for you if you do decide to read this. This did get really great book reviews, and even though there wasn't a fantastic storyline to it, it never escalated to anything. There was never any shocking moments or anything big that happened. But there was a lot to talk about when we met for book club with this book. We really had a lot to share, and when the questions were being asked, it sparked a lot of conversation. So this is really a great book club pick, I think, if you are a part of one, and it's very entertaining. So, you know, I really don't have too much to say about it. It's not the type of book that I normally would be drawn to read, but I think that's the fun part of being in a book club, is it prompts you to read things that maybe you normally wouldn't, and sometimes you really do enjoy it. So this was a pretty good book, and I did hear that the Audible of this is phenomenal. So if you're going to be trying this book out, I would highly recommend checking out the Audible. Even though I've read it, I still might go back and listen to the Audible, because on GoodReads, so many people said that if you're going to read this book, listen to the Audible, because it's really well done. And this is going to also be, I think, like a mini series coming out soon as well. So that'll be fun to watch now that I kind of know the story of the characters, and Daisy Jones, who's very interesting, quite a free spirit. I think that this is based a lot off of Fleetwood Mac, just from other things that I've heard on the internet. So, and Daisy Jones is very much like Stevie Nicks in regards to just the description of her. They talk about how she sings with like this very raspy, unique voice, and that just reminds me a lot of Stevie Nicks. So really a fun read. And then when I did my last reading wrap up, can you believe there was a book I totally forgot to mention, and I read it through the holiday season. It was a book club book, and I actually posted a picture of the book on Instagram, and some of you guys said, oh, I can't wait to hear what you thought of this book, and then I never even talked about it, and that was 7 Days of Us by Francesca Hornak. It's about this family that's quarantined together in this house over the holiday season, because one of the characters was fighting like this hag disease virus thing in this foreign country, and when she came home to her family, she had to be quarantined along with her family in their vacation home. So they're kind of stuck together for a week, and they all have these different secrets that they're hiding from each other, and eventually things start to come out. Some people end up visiting the house unexpectedly, and once they come in contact with the family, they have to come into the house and they have to stay throughout the entire quarantine, because now they're like infected just by having any type of interaction with the family. So it was entertaining. It wasn't my favorite book. I felt like the characters were not fleshed out at all. You didn't really get to know them intimately, which I don't like that. Like, I like to really almost feel like I'm either best friends with the character or I am like the character myself. Like, sometimes I feel like books are so well written and you just completely understand what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and I didn't get that from any of the characters in the book. I didn't like or appreciate the ending at all, so I probably wouldn't really recommend it. I thought it was kind of a depressing book. There were not many happy times throughout it, and being that I read it around the holidays, I was looking for something something a little bit more good-spirited and fun and happy to read around Christmas time, and that just wasn't it for me. But I thought I would mention it because I totally forgot to in the last video, and I know some of you guys are interested in what I thought of it, so sadly I didn't think very much of it. It was okay. It wasn't the worst thing I ever read, and it was entertaining, but I wouldn't read it again. So that is everything that I already read over the past month. And what I am reading for the month of March, I just started this. It's The Winter Sea by Susanna Kearsley. I love her writing. I'm a big fan of historical fiction and most especially time travel romances, and this is going to be both. I really think it's going to be a book that I enjoy. I like some of the other books that I read by her, and they are kind of time travel, going back in time and then being in the present, and then there's always a love story that goes along with it, and it's really fascinating. The lead character in this book is an author, and she's working on her book by traveling to different places where she thinks certain things happened in history and just trying to play out what the characters did, like real life characters, you know, the locations that they were at and the things that they did, and it kind of starts to come to life for real for her. In her mind, her characters always become kind of real in her imagination, but they're starting to become really real. So I've only begun like the first couple of chapters, but I think this is going to be a book that I'm really going to be captivated by and enjoy. The other book that I started, I'm actually listening to the Audible, is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I'm excited to read some more of her books, and I really love listening to the Audible, and they're in Bath right now, and I went to Bath a while back, and I didn't know about this book. I didn't know about Jane Austen. I know that's horrible. I was really young and not into reading at all at the time, and I went to Bath and I went to all the places that she's talking about in the book, and I never read any Jane Austen. So I feel like I need to go back now and re-experience being in Bath, and kind of revisiting the places that they talk about in the book. That would be so much fun. So that's been great. The other book that I'm going to be reading for the month of March, and this is for the book club, is Educated by Tara Westover. It's a memoir, and it's about a woman who is a survivalist Mormon, and basically she is kept at home, isolated with her family. They don't go to school, they like don't leave the house or do anything, and she decides that she wants to break away from the home and go to college, and on her own she becomes this very well-educated, smart woman coming from such isolation and never experiencing life at all. And I don't really know all the details of it. I just actually ordered it from Target. I found the best deal. I'm always, whenever I shop for a book, I go to thriftbooks.com, I go to Amazon, and then I'll search Walmart and Target to see if they have a better deal, and sometimes they do. So this time Target won. So my book's coming tomorrow and I'll be able to start reading it, but that's another one that I'm going to be reading in March. So my March reads are going to be Northanger Abbey, Educated, and The Winter Sea. And I'll probably, hopefully, get at least one more in. If I could do 4 books a month, that's kind of my goal, but it doesn't always happen, especially since this book, you can see, is pretty thick. And for me, this kind of counts as 2 books. So we'll see how I make out, and that's it. I hope that you guys enjoyed hearing about what I've read and what I'm going to be reading. I think it's always fun to hear what people are reading and what's on their TBR. I'm actually going to be sharing really soon, if I haven't done so already, 20 books that I hope to read in 2020 or 2020s, because it's a lot of classics. It's all going to be based on classics that I've been hoping to read. So that's so much fun to share, because you guys know I really like classic literature, but it takes a little more work for me to get into it. I feel like it's harder reading most of the time and more time consuming, so I have to be in the right frame of mind and the right mood to read an older book, but I think it's going to be fun to challenge myself. So that's going to be a fun video to share as well. All right, I hope that you guys enjoyed watching. Let me know in the comments below what you are currently reading. Let me know if you've read anything that I am going to be reading. I'd love to know your opinion on it, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.